Tai sveiki visi, toliau tęsiam neredaguotą pokalbius ir šiandien turėsim pokalbį su pašnekovu iš Lenkijos, kuris buvo anonsuotas. Pristatysim pašnekovą angliškai, tai nesikartosim, bet kokiu atveju kviečiu visus, kurie prenumeruoja neredaguotą kanalą, užsiprenumeruoti ir Let's Talk Europe, nes ten yra visi angliakalbiai pokalbiai, tai nieko nepraleisit, o čia be didelių įžangų tęsiam pokalbį. So I introduced you as a special guest, so I guess now I can expand on that. We have a guest from Poland, Jacek Bartosiak. If I pronounced the surname incorrect, you're gonna correct me. He is a co-founder or founder probably of the Strategy and Future think tank in Poland. If I understand correctly, geopolitics is the main thing of the think tank, but he's gonna tell himself. So hello, Jacek.
Hello. All you said is correct. I'm Jacek Bartosiak, based in Warsaw. Strategy and Future would deal with, forecasting the future, military strategy, the competitive strategy, net assessment, basically geopolitics.
And our friend who got us introduced, he also mentioned that you were running some kind of communication port before. What kind of project was that?
I was the head I was the chairman of the management board of the largest infrastructure project in the history of the entire region.
All right, so our viewers get the point. What kind of guest we have today? So, without any taking, of his precious time, let's start from the questions. And of course, everybody in Lithuania, especially and probably not only Lithuania, is concerned and worried about the escalation regarding the transit from Russia mainland to Kaliningrad. What is the view from Poland towards this reaction that we got from Russia? Because like looking plainly, it wasn't something special. It was just following the sanctions that were European Union imposed on the Russian Federation, but the Russia, of course, took it some kind of Lithuanian personal, not even sure how to call it, but some kind of act that is not, in some goodwill towards Russia. How do you see it, and how do your colleagues in Poland see this, and what is the possible outcome?
Okay, the situation about the potential corridor and the access to the Kaliningrad through the land bridge is potentially escalatory in terms that the Russians may try to play the diplomatic game, by trying to isolate Poland, Lithuania, Baltic states from the family of nations in Europe, accusing us of non-humanitarian approach to their acute issue in the Kaliningrad, lack of supplies and energy, and that we are hesitant to help and reluctant to help. And of course, that may create a sort of a political play, the game, that might undermine Article 5 should the Russians invade, should they try to compel by force Lithuanians to open up such corridor. And for example, we are concerned here in Poland that in that case, the Germans might not trigger Article 5 on the NATO treaty, and in this way isolating us, or at least behaving politically in a way that the Russians could think that we are isolated within NATO, and that changes already the security architecture. So this is highly dangerous. We have played many scenarios like that at Strategy and Future in the past, exactly along those lines. And it's always, as I said, dangerous. So the critical thing in that case is, unfortunately, the thing that the Western countries don't want to provide, meaning that 3 Baltic states, including Lithuania, demanded or requested that NATO troops be expanded in numbers and on the Baltic states' territory and in capabilities. And they shouldn't be just a tripwire. I'm sure you're familiar with the tripwire concept, but permanent, should be stationed permanently in numbers and properly in better locations that they are stationing now. And that would deter Russians more. That would deter Russians from thinking about stupid things, how to forcefully compel such scenario.
But you know, Jacek, in Lithuania, we are also worried that since our main forces from NATO are the German forces, there are some kind of talks, you know, like, of course, not very publicly, that there might be an envelope, you know, within the, the German troops leader that would say that in the case of X, just pack your stuff and go back to Germany.
That's what you say in Lithuania in the public debate. It's interesting, yeah, because this is what we think in Poland, by the way. So yes, that's what you think.
But in Lithuania, this is not an open discussion. Usually in open discussion, everybody is very polite, but like in the podcast scene, like we have some influential figures who are, well, openly saying this to their audience, and that's what they think. How you see it the same, as I understand?
Of course. Plus, the place where they are stationed in Tukla is not a best spot to be chosen, because it's not on the main potential axis of advance. You know, from Riga in Latvia towards the Nemunas River and towards the Kaliningrad. Okay, so Tukla may be simply bypassed, and it will have no meaning or no impact on the battlefield. So you can get, you know, either to Vilnius or to Kaunas.
Well, there are two other polygons on the way. One is like more of training for the military academy. The other one is sort of a bit smaller, but on the west side of Kaunas. So it probably
polygons. But the place where they are stationed, and this is behind the river, and they need to cross the river to engage the enemy as well, which is, and Nemunas River has very poor crossing sections. You know,
well, it has quite a lot of bridges when they are, you know,
when they are existing. Plus, west of the Kaunas, there are not so many of them. So it's you know, it's not the best spot to be, and if you want to really fight. So it boils down to what the defense strategy is taken. Plus, the three Baltic states should have one common defense operation plans.
Well, you probably heard from the Estonian Prime Minister. She said that in the NATO plan of defense, well, there is a scenario where the countries are taken, as I understand, or only Estonia, but at least Estonia is for sure taken, and then it's fought back. So it's not like a resistance in the place. It's thinking what to do after, you know, it's been invaded.
Yeah, let's talk about it in a minute. But I just want to say that, you know, if you take a look at geography of three Baltic states, it would be better to have one operational plan of defense, because otherwise, if you have three separate ones and they are not supported by numbers of troops, there is a cascading effect of rolling down your defenses. Okay, and you will be tending to focus your defense around your capital, which compromises the defense of another capitals. And the center of gravity of the three Baltic states is this beautiful city of Riga in Latvia. Yeah. So that would be the main objective of the Russian operation in the full-fledged war, and that's you know, that puts a lot of questions. So the problem is that NATO apparently doesn't want to station troops in numbers that would be welcomed by the Baltic states. And what does it say to you guys?
Well, it doesn't say anything nice, but you know, we still try to be polite, because you know, still, you know, the partnership, and one of the Russian narratives is to destroy our, you know, unity. So maybe it's not the best intention to fully, you know, criticize each other. But yeah, we are of course worried. At least, you know, we can say that.
Yeah, but what does it mean in practical terms for your political life, military, you know, activities? What does it mean?
Well, it means that we are expendables in a sense.
You see, this is how it works. And if the NATO doesn't provide those troops, then Russians might think that, you know, there is a deterrence failure, just like it was in Ukraine, right? Maybe they don't want to defend you guys. And that invites the war as opposed to deter it.
Well, publicly, we had announcements, you know, every centimeter is going to be defended. And, you know, Biden said that, and, you know, the European leaders repeated something similar. So probably everybody, you know, is counting on this to be correct, you know.
Fortunately, the conduct of war in Ukraine, especially the first phase of operation around Kiev, proved that given the terrain of the Baltic states, which is, narrow channels, forested, a lot of lakes, scarce population, a lot of small roads, and a lot of, forests and barriers and obstacles of the line of horizon, you can easily defeat the Russians. I mean, you can easily engage the Russians with small unit tactics, if you have a proper morale and proper training. Of course, and if you're supported by the artillery and some heavy presence of the NATO troops. So the conduct of war in Ukraine is sort of favoring the geography of the Baltic states, if you are well prepared. And that's the whole point. I really wonder what's going to happen at the Madrid summit. That is, within a few days. I'm not sure when you want to publish our recording.
Well, it's going to be soon. Before, so we won't have, it's going to be today, published today, so you can easily.
Cool. Okay, cool. So this is very important, whether they will deliver more troops, but the rumor has it that they will not. There will be some troops earmarked only for deployment should the war start up. But the problem is that the Russians might start the war right away from the marching orders, without too much of the advance warning. And this is critically important for you, especially if you take a look at geography, and I hope many English speakers from all around the world will be listening to what we are saying now. And it only seems so that Baltic states are small. They are quite big and extended and stretched in terms of the power projection. So, I think that the proper stationing and posture of the NATO troops is not adequate to the threat. And it wouldn't cost them much to invest more in it, unless they think that, the defense of the Baltic states is in question. And this is critically important for Poland, for you to know. You heard about this Przemysł-Suwałki thing, this Przemysł-Suwałki gap.
Yeah, so we call it the same.
Suwałki corridor that connects you and us. And it's flanked, this gap is flanked by the Kaliningrad enclave and by Belarus. If you take a look at the system of roads, actually you cannot keep this lifeline open to you guys from Poland. First of all, without heavy Polish involvement, because we have the same problem. There are too few NATO troops in Poland. Second, we need to do something about, Belarus, because, you can be flanked. You can be flanked from east by fire maneuver, not even with maneuver, with the fire maneuver, artillery, and also from Kaliningrad. And that poses the questions of what to do with the Kaliningrad and the Western Belarus up to the Nemunas River system, valley. Yeah? So whether we should push the Belarusians further away from our lifeline to Lithuania. And that is highly escalatory. And that requests political decisions from NATO in times of war. Okay. And the stakes are not even, the risks are not even, and Poles will have to carry those risks upon their shoulders. And if you take a look at the map, you will see that then we have the strategic dilemma in Warsaw, because Vilna is northeast of Warsaw, and we need to keep the Suwałki corridor open. But Warsaw itself, our capital, is flat exposed to the Belarusian plains, less than 200 kilometers in the open tank terrain. And if we commit too many troops to keep the Baltic states open and still being flanked from those two territories that I have mentioned 2 minutes ago, we keep our capital open to direct access from Belarus, from Brest and Grodno.
Well, I can really understand what would be the choice in such dilemma, for the political leaders in Poland.
Yeah, but this is the problem that NATO should understand, and they need to provide answers to those strategic dilemmas. We should impose such dilemmas upon Russians and try to solve as many on our side, as opposed to keep counting more and more on our side.
But here is the main question. from your point of view, is the forces that are located in Kaliningrad, and the forces that are located, in the Belarus, are they capable of doing such maneuver here? The blocking maneuver.
Not now.
Not now.
Yeah? Not now. But but prior to the war, they were.
Yeah.
They were, and we were afraid. We in our strategy in future we produced, we made the project called New Model Army for Poland, when we proposed the new posture, new army actually for Poland, and we were thinking that the Russians could attack Poland directly from Belarus, and additional auxiliary axis of approach from the Kaliningrad enclave. And then I was suggesting in the paper, which had 600,000 views in Poland. We published a 10 hours long presentation, 500 slides in Polish about it, where there is a role for Lithuania as well. So we were suggesting that we should deploy, of course, we should talk to you guys about it. We could be ready to deploy 2 brigades or 1 battalion and 1 brigade to Lithuania, to 2 places. One near Mariampol, between Warsaw and Vilnius, west of the main axis to Vilnius, perfect tank terrain that could have a pinning effect on the forces in Kaliningrad. Mariampol, as you know, is close to the Kaliningrad, between Olita and Mariampol, actually, right? I don't know how you say it in the Lithuanian.
Yeah, your pronunciation is proper. Don't worry about that.
So we would have a pinning effect, offensive pinning effect against any movements that Russians would like to have against Lithuania and Poland. And another force east of Vilnius, we call it Midnikaya Gap.
Yeah, so we are basically doing constructing a polygon there, not far. So it is perfectly capable of hosting. As I understand, that's where the plan is to host, those German troops if they will be deployed.
Okay, and this is the gap that opens up all access to Minsk, Lida, most even Grodno, to cut through the rear area of the Russians and Belarusians operating against Poland. It's not about attacking, it's about having psychological effect of pinning those guys down. Just like, you're showing something, it's called, in maritime warfare, it's called fleet in being. You show that you have a force here and those guys need to be ready to react to it and they cannot move somewhere else, yeah? This is what you do. And then you pin them down. You keep their feet frozen, yeah?
Steady.
Yes, so that was the... So that was the sort of the concept, this sort of.
And how is this concept approached by the government of Poland? I don't know, military personnel.
Yeah, I mean, Poland is right now at the beginning of a major military reform, probably the biggest in its history, even in the history of our Commonwealth, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Kaczynski, our leader, promised to pay all the money that we have to field a force that would be one of the most modern in Europe and the most capable. The numbers are completely stunning.
Yeah, we heard about it. 500,000.
MOD is traveling with a book check all around the world, buying all stuff, and they promise to expand the numbers up to even 400,000 troops, peacetime, standing army, and Poland wants to really take this fight. We think there will be war with Russia, and we want to be ready. And it's not a joke. I mean, we really want to do it.
Let's just stress out, from your perspective, and most of the military analysts and the military, there will be some kind of engagement.
Yes, we think that if the Ukrainians do not win the war, meaning regaining Crimea and the Donbass, or mowing down the Russian ground forces, we're going to have some sort of showdown in the Baltic states and in Poland. That's my opinion, the strategy in future, and I think a lot of people here in Poland, maybe not all of them, I don't want to say on behalf of all people, we expect, because the Russians will just have Передышка. Do you still speak Russian? And it's like,
I still speak a bit, but most of our younger listeners, younger than 30, they don't.
Передышка meaning rest, rest period. So the Russians call it Передышка. Because the war in Ukraine is about something bigger than Ukraine itself. It's about the rules of the road, who is in charge of Eurasia and strategic flows. So basically, this is a war between China and the United States, and Russians are playing their third party who wants to sort of position itself in the game. Okay, it's as big as it gets. This is who is in charge of the world. Okay, and this is just a symptom. It's just a symptom. Like, it's the first campaign of the Napoleonic Wars of the 21st century. And I'm sorry, guys, but you are and we are at the front line. Right?
Yeah, I can already imagine the comments we will get,
at the limits of the American power. I'm sure that your listeners understand that America has two oceans, Atlantic and the Pacific, and it projects power across those oceans. And they always project power against the enemy in Eurasia that threatens to control the assets of Eurasia. This is why Americans went to war against Germany twice. And this is why they had this Cold War with the Soviets. And this is why now they are moving against China. Okay. And Baltic states and Poland becoming a NATO member, we just entered this world, transatlantic world, underpinned by the United States power projection. Okay. We entered this alliance at the last minute. And geographically, we are at the limits of the empire. Okay. And the key thing is that both China and Russia are probing, are checking where are the limits of this empire. And I'm sorry again, but you are geographically in the crash zone where this will be tested, just like Ukraine is, and Poland as well. Okay.
So you, in your opinion, Putin and company, they don't think that the fifth article is going to be activated if they, or they just don't care, they want to test it. What
I don't know. The problem is that I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, but the assumption is that, for them, it's no big deal, because what we think, Ukraine is always, we're considered, on the other side of NATO, and, there was lots of words, but it's not a NATO country, and, they could gamble. And you think that this gamble inside NATO territory is as real as it gets?
I just don't know, but I want to be ready for such proposition. Since, in my personal opinion, the deterrence failed. American deterrence failed in case of Ukraine. Remember the months prior to the outbreak of war. Biden was warning Putin not to start the war because he will face consequences. So he was signaling consequences, right? Still, Putin did initiate the war. So deterrence failed.
They faced some consequences, of course, most of the...
Yeah, but facing consequences, still they did it. It means that deterrence failed, because deterrence fails when your enemy, despite being signaled that there will be consequences, starts the war. So it was a deterrence failure, and now we have the war.
Yeah, but even
if Putin miscalculated because he thought that he would win quickly, and he's maybe even losing, but still deterrence failed. And I'm afraid it might be also in case of NATO.
But what I want to ask, in the previous years, in the Merkel era, he had quite a close alliance with, Germany and France. And from the last visit that we saw, those leaders in Kiev, well, some political commentators say that the kind of something changed, and those leaders actually cannot be on the other side of the curve if they want to still be popular among the voters. Do you think that, this was part of the game as well, to count on those leaders just basically giving Ukraine up and then, he could easily move forward? Well, not easily, but easier. Or is it something else here?
I think that prior to the war, Russia was in a fantastic position. They were winning this contest. They had more and more to say in Europe. They had closer and closer cooperation with Germany, France, and other guys in the Western European, part of the continent. The Americans were losing in Kabul, domestically. This military spending was not great. Many internal issues. NATO was not up to the game in terms of stationing the troops in the east. Putin was doing all those exercises showing how quick and responsive his forces are. So he thought that he has a conventional upper hand in this part of the world. And he demanded acknowledgement of that. Do you understand?
Yep.
Because he said, actually it was Lavrov who said it in December, it's a balance of power that decides, guys. And we are the main player in that field here. So we demand political influence up to the Oder River. NATO installations gone. Arrangements with us, what can be stations, what cannot. You see how this would end it? And if the Americans agreed to it, your energy companies would be owned by Russians. After some time, your government would have to consult with Russians the main, decisions on international cooperation. This is how it works. This is the power.
Yeah, but it didn't happen, so that's the good part.
Americans said no. Then they said, so we're going to have war. And the Americans said, okay, so let's have the war. And they started this war. And now this correlation of power is being decided by blood and sweat of the Ukrainian military and the Russian military. So, but the iron dice was cast. Okay. And the question is, how long will the Ukrainian army stand? If they do not last long, and the Russians still will not be acknowledged as a great power having control over the future of the Central Eastern Europeans, including you and me, then they would need to show again that they cannot be deterred and stopped if they want to really do something, because this is the ultimate test of whether you're a power or not, and whether you have power or not. You understand?
So yeah, I do understand, but the main question is here, what is the vibe, in the NATO government, among the leader states? How should we proceed with this? In terms of sending weapons.
So what does the war in Ukraine teach us?
Well, the first thing that teaches us is that the West is quite slow in supporting our region in terms of military power.
Okay, some are quicker, some are slower, but still at the end of the day, it's a Ukrainian land army that is fighting, right? And this is their soldiers that are suffering, right?
Well, Kaczynski has voiced out a few times that there should be some peacekeeping NATO force in Ukraine.
Of course. Oh yeah, Poles and Ukrainians would like to see the Americans having a fight in Ukraine, and of course creating a no-fly zone and creating sanctuaries for of course. But the real players do not want it. So what's the deal here? And basically, do you feel, as a Lithuanian, do you feel cozy and comfortable with the fact that someone else is pulling the strings and you have completely no decision-making to do?
Well, I guess the answer is already in your question. That any sensible person doesn't feel relaxed about this.
Exactly, and I'm telling you that Poland is big enough not to accept this.
Yeah. So
And as you know, together we used to run the empire. So, and people in the West forgot it.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I wanted to ask you, because if this war would end, unfavorably for Russia, and there would be some kind of new power, gravity center, key of Warsaw, let's put it, maybe Baltics as well, that is sort of a threat to Berlin, to Paris. Do you think that they are worried about such a potential power shift?
Yes. I think that in Berlin and in Paris, they are already shocked and surprised, stunned actually, that we have our own agenda. We're sending tanks to Ukraine, that we don't give a damn and we help them. We don't ask the Germans whether we can do it. And that we have our own grand strategy towards Russia, which is not in line with what the Germans are doing.
And how do you see China positioning itself in this whole conflict? Because like not a while ago, we heard just a few days in St. Petersburg, there was this economic forum, and Tokayev told a very interesting, statement there, which kind of shocked Putin. Then what I have still seen in the media is most of the analysts say that this is a Chinese position that was only, expressed for the, voice of their ally. What are their, goal in this game? Do they need a strong Russia, a weak Russia, or they don't give a shit about this? Because right now at G7 summit, we hear that they want to counter the Belt and Road Initiative with some additional projects in Europe. That would be some in terms of 600 billion, if I remember correctly, is planned to be raised for those projects. So obviously China is in the game here as well in the region.
Yeah. China and Russia have one common enemy. United States, and they simply want to expel the United States from Eurasia.
But China's economy without United States, is it possible?
Of course, China's economy. China is already an economic superpower, no doubt about it.
Yeah, but they are exporting, and the main buyer is what? The Europe and the United States.
Yeah, but but United States and Europe cannot survive without Chinese products. Take a look at your computer.
Yeah, we know that everything is being sent there, been sent there through the last decades.
Plus, the Chinese are moving towards the internal circulation of of trade and production. No doubt they are a superpower economically. Americans tend to say that they are dependent upon Americans because, in Eurasia, Americans tend to tell everybody that, that it's all about Americans because they keep the political influence. Their credibility is strictly related to their capabilities, and, everybody's judging everybody every minute. So the Americans want to present themselves as a peacock that always, shows the best, right? And then all nations in Eurasia orient themselves towards the Americans, not towards the Chinese. So that's why they will be saying such things. That's just part of the game, part of this theater, this posturing. The thing is that China and Russia are united by this desire to get rid of the Americans in Eurasia, but they have nothing else to do in common. They are neighbors. They will compete. China is at least 10 times stronger than Russia. 10 times strong. So with time, it can only be a client state and patron state relationship, with cheap resources and energy resources being delivered to burgeoning Chinese middle class. That's why Russians didn't want to be part of the Chinese scheme. All this war was to make forcible negotiations with the Europeans to get rid of the Americans, and Russia becoming a European state and having a one big Europe from Vladivostok to Lisbon. But in the process, the Russians would have to completely devastate Poland, Lithuanian, Estonian, Belarusians, Ukrainians, Latvians.
So you mean restore the Soviet Union sort of terrain?
No, but without territorial gains, but in terms of influencing the situation on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the soft touch.
Soft touch, yeah.
You know, in terms of energy, how the strategic flows operate, how cooperation is being modeled, so that the Russians would get the modernization, the capital, the technology from Germany and elsewhere, in exchange for the power projection capabilities and stabilization of Eurasia in this new project. And if you listen to French, you will hear between the lines.
Oh, we heard it in Vilnius. Macron was here like a year ago, and he said that, you know, Europe is from Lisbon to Vladivostok. So, yeah.
You see, exactly. This is what they think. And the problem is, my friend, that it's not in the interest of the intermarim countries, you and me, because it's in our interest to change two things. And we share the common interest, you and me, your country and my country. First grand strategy interest is to keep the Russians out of the European system so that they could not influence affairs on the continent. And this is what happened after the demise of the Soviet Union. That's why Lithuania joined EU and NATO. You could make your own decisions, okay? Once you cannot, you're over.
Yeah, we know the history lesson from the...
This is principle number one, and we share the same one. And the principle number two of grand strategy of Lithuania and Poland and countries of the region is to change the unbearable status of subcontractors to the Western economies, economic retardedness and backwardness, because for the last 500 years, we didn't take part in the connectivity of the world ocean, you know? So we didn't have enough money, we didn't have an investment, and we just export people, wood, tar, and resources to the West. We understand. And right now we are the subcontractors to the German economy. How many people you lost in Lithuania over the last 10 years?
Well, almost half of the population, like, well, at least 30%. Yeah.
Exactly. And so principle number one is to reverse the effects. In Polish, we call it the dualism on the Elbe River. The phenomenon of the dualism of the economic development on the Elbe River. So west of the Elbe River, there was capitalism and modernity. East of it, feudalism, and with time, subjugation to the Russian Empire, because the Russians had a better military and there were bigger numbers, and we were not developed properly. And those differences still exist with us. We need to change it together. And this is why this war is about the independence of the intermarim countries, so that they could create our own value chains, our own supply chains, our own division of labor chains, okay? Maybe with the support of the English-speaking nations of the United States and Great Britain, and create North and South axis, our own markets, our own middle class, and, you know, sort of try to move away from this domination of France and Germany in Europe.
So the last thing
that's grand strategy of the Commonwealth, as you know, and listeners in Lithuania should know that. And this is exactly what Poles are thinking. And basically, this is why Poland went to war, the Second World War.
Yeah, so, you know, listeners in Lithuania, of course, are familiar with the history. The last thing I want to ask you, because I see that we are running out of time, is Britain and their interest is, and why, you know, we hear such, at least in terms of, you know, words and, you know, some military assistance to Ukraine, we hear Boris Johnson kind of favorably talking about new coalitions or some kind of alternative, even military coalitions, which is fine from what we heard with the United States. What is their game here? Do they want to compete with the Germans, Russians here, or some other point?
Okay, the British Empire controlled the access to the through the Atlantic, across the Atlantic Ocean to the continent. So they were always trying to keep the proper balance of power on the continent. Once they couldn't influence the proper balance of power on the continent themselves, they asked the Americans to help them twice or even 3 times. The First World War, when they couldn't handle themselves, the Second World War, the Cold War, and now the Fourth War, which is of the new great power and competition Eurasia. So once they Brexited, they want to have the proper balance of power on the continent as well. The English-speaking nations hate the concept of the continental consolidation from Vladivostok to Lisbon. They don't want to hear about it. It's a threat to them. They want to have the intermarium, countries that separate Russia and Germany, countries that separate from Scandinavia to Turkey, connect Black Sea and the Baltic Sea. That's what they want. And
so
this is the
it
British.
Sounds promising
It was a British guy, Halford Mackinder, who coined this, who designed all this. And you may say a lot of things, but continuity in the British Empire is still there. And this is how it works. Of course, they are not strong now. They can help here or there, but mindset stays with them and remains the same. So this is how it works.
All right, Jacek. So for the last question, so what should we expect in the near future? How would you see the developments like in this summer until the end of the year? How close are we to the conflict you mentioned, or this is a time for something in between, or it will depend on Ukraine? What is your vision here?
Attrition warfare in the Donbass, the increasingly acute issues of morale among the Ukrainian military and the Russian military, the increasing acute issues of the manpower shortages in the Russian military, the increasingly acute problem for the Russian leadership of mass mobilization, which they cannot do and undertake for many, many reasons, of which I may say. The center of gravity for Ukraine being a constant delivery of weapons from the West and the money, because the Ukrainians will need money to keep on going. In order to have a society and economy, you need to have the money, and they need to keep. War is not, making money at all. And then there will be food crisis globally triggered by this war, and huge pressures on the social contracts across the world, including Western Europe. Energy crisis like we've never seen in our lifetimes, probably in Europe, unless quick remedies and countermeasures are taken now. We will see repeated attempts to compel Zelensky, president of Ukraine, to some twisted truce in order to allegedly save the world peace and stability of Europe. And I have no idea what's going to happen, because there are too many factors, and there are also psychology factors of Zelensky and his people, conduct of war in Ukraine. This is too many factors, that I have no idea, but I have a feeling. I feel it, and our forecasts prove right over the last 7 years of strategy and future. And we are writing books about it. If the Ukrainians do not win, and if they do not stun the Russians so that they could be seen as winners or victors of the war, it's going to be only a передышка, a resting phase, and we will face Russia on our own uses. And you'd better talk, Lithuanians and Poles should better talk to each other more often and discuss some operational planning, because NATO might not be good enough, so to speak, especially if there will be a new generation warfare, some terror acts, some, hijacking. So, we need to respond in kind, you see, we need to be proactive. We need to have a common thinking here along the frontline states, which just cannot be reactive, because we will be losing it. So we are entering a completely new era epic times. And we all thought that it had ended, right?
Yeah, we all thought that history has ended, yeah.
Yes, it has not ended, and it comes with vengeance, and it comes with various teaching lessons. And I hope that my Poland will, will manage to face this. And because actually we are the only country here in the region that can really carry out the military reform and feel a remarkable force that could deter Russians. And we were defeating them many times in the past. You see.
Yeah, well, not many Western listeners know this, but yeah, we are proud of that.
Yeah. So we will see this time around. Yeah, but things are changing. The stones have moved in Poland.
All right, Jacek. So thank you so much for your time, everybody who were listening. We had a conversation with a strategy and future founder from Warsaw, Jacek Bartosiak. So I hope we're gonna expand this conversation on some nicer note, in the future, and hopefully, the pessimistic note is gonna be absent. But yeah, we should be realists, and we should, as our guests say, communicate more between the frontline countries that are the Baltic states and Poland as the flagship, of any possibility of withstanding this possible conflict. So thank you again. Thanks to everyone who were listening, and see you next time in the Let's Talk Europe episode.